It was just another cold Tuesday evening in New York City. The streets were slick from a morning's rain, and the wind blew sharp through the narrow alleys of Manhattan. Inside Maison d'Or, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, things were warm, calm, and exactly as expected. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light across linen-draped tables. The air smelled of roasted duck, white truffle, and aged wine. Waiters glided effortlessly between tables, their black suits' crisp movements refined. In the open kitchen, Chef Marcus Renner, the man behind the Michelin star, was focused, plating seared scallops with a balsamic reduction like it was art. Everything was smooth, controlled, perfect, and then the door opened. Heads turned, slowly at first, then faster as people realized something wasn't right. A man had walked in, but not the kind of man this place was used to. He didn't belong. He wore a torn brown coat, at least 2 sizes too big. His jeans were stained, and his boots, more like remnants of boots, left wet marks on a marble floor. His hair was tangled beneath a knit cap, and his beard was overgrown. He didn't carry anything but a worn-out backpack, held tightly to his chest like it was the last thing he owned. For a moment, the restaurant held its breath. A couple near the door shifted uncomfortably. One man reached for his phone, maybe to call security. A hostess stepped forward, clearly unsure of what to say. But before she could speak, the man raised a hand, calmly, almost respectfully, and said, "I'm not here to cause trouble." His voice was quiet but firm. Everyone heard it. From the kitchen, Chef Marcus looked up. He was used to distractions, customers complaining about the wine list, influencers demanding special treatment. But this was different. Something about the man's presence was grounded, familiar, even. The hostess looked toward Marcus, silently asking what to do. Marcus, still holding a plated dish in one hand, nodded slightly. "Let him talk," he said. The man took another step forward, eyes scanning the room. He didn't look at the diners, who were now either gawking or pretending to ignore him. His eyes landed instead on the open kitchen, where the aroma of butter and garlic swirled in the air. "I used to be a chef," he said. "Not here, but in places like this." A few people chuckled quietly. It sounded absurd, this man, dressed in what looked like years of hardship, claiming to once stand behind a stove like Marcus. But Marcus didn't laugh. "What's your name?" he asked. David Langston." The room went still again. Chef Marcus blinked. That name, it meant something. Years ago, when he was still training in France, he remembered reading about David Langston, a rising star in the culinary world, known for his saffron seafood risotto and emotional cooking style. His Brooklyn bistro had earned a Michelin star just 18 months after opening, a rare feat even in New York. But then, silence. Langston had disappeared. No more interviews, no restaurant openings, no scandals, no press. Just gone. Until now, Marcus stepped out from behind the kitchen and slowly approached the man. "You're that David Langston?" David offered a tired smile. "I used to be." For a few seconds, Marcus didn't say anything. Neither did anyone else. Finally, David spoke again. "I'm not here for a handout," he said. "I don't want money. I just want to cook." The words landed heavy. "I have nothing," David continued. "But I still have that. The fire, the craft. Let me cook something, just one dish. If it's no good, I'll leave and never come back. But if it is, maybe I can earn a meal. With dignity." Marcus studied him. The man was clearly exhausted, thin, weather-worn. But there was something unshakable in his eyes. Not desperation, not madness, but passion. Real passion. Behind him, the kitchen staff watched in stunned silence. "You want to cook here?" Marcus asked. David nodded once. "One plate. That's all I ask." Marcus turned to his sous chef and said, "Clear a station." There were gasps from the dining room. One older man near the window scoffed loudly. "This is insane," he said. But no one stopped Marcus. David was handed an apron. He took it with care, like it was sacred cloth. He washed his hands at the prep sink, his fingers trembling slightly under the warm water. "Do you have saffron?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "We do." David smiled. Then I'll make my risotto. And just like that, a homeless man stepped behind the line of a Michelin star kitchen, ready to face heat, steel, and judgment, all for a single plate. No one knew what would happen next, but every eye in that restaurant stayed locked on him. Because sometimes the most unforgettable nights don't start with champagne or celebration. They start when a broken man walks into a world he once ruled and dares to reclaim it. The clatter of fine cutlery and the soft hum of jazz had faded. For the first time that night, Maison d'Or wasn't humming with luxury. It was holding its breath. In the center of it all stood a man named David Langston. He didn't look like he belonged. His clothes were worn, his face lined with years of hard living. But when he asked to cook, not beg, not plead, just cook, he said it like someone who still remembered who he was. "Just one plate," he said. "If it's good, give me a meal. If not, I walk." You could hear a pin drop in that five-star dining room. Man cook a dangerous yes. Chef Marcus Renner wasn't a sentimental man. He didn't tolerate chaos in his kitchen. But something about David's voice, calm, controlled, yet raw with desperation, struck him. Marcus knew what ego sounded like. This wasn't ego. This was identity. A man trying to prove that despite everything, he still mattered. "Clear a station," Marcus said. His sous chef froze. "Chef, are you serious?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Give him room. And give him the ingredients he needs." Somewhere in the back, a dishwasher gasped. Soap back in the heat. David stepped behind the line like a ghost stepping back into a life he'd left long ago. The kitchen, gleaming with stainless steel and fire, greeted him like an old friend. Cold at first, but familiar. He washed his hands carefully, scrubbed his fingers like he was washing off the way to the streets. Then he tied the apron behind his back, adjusting it like muscle memory. He didn't need a recipe. He didn't ask for instructions. He just said, "I'm making saffron seafood risotto." Marcus raised an eyebrow. That was the dish, the one that made Langston famous a decade ago. The one that food critics had called comfort and complexity in a single spoon. The one that had vanished when David did. Could he still pull it off? Fire a kitchen divided. The other cooks stepped back, watching silently. Some curious, others skeptical. The young pastry chef, Elena, whispered to her colleague, "What if he burns it? We're full tonight." But no one moved to stop him. David worked slowly at first, not because he was unsure, but because he was remembering how the pan felt in his grip, how the flame responded to the smallest twist, how saffron bloomed best not with heat, but with patience. He poured olive oil into the pan, let it shimmer, added chopped shallots, letting them sweat instead of sear. Then he stirred in arborio rice, coating every grain, and then the saffron, a tiny pinch, golden, priceless, transformative. The moment it hit the pan, even the air changed. Fried shrimp more than a meal. David reached for shrimp, scallops, and a touch of white wine. His hands, though rough and aged, moved with grace. Not showy, not flashy, just right. Marcus watched from across the kitchen, arms crossed. He wasn't sure what to feel. Part of him wanted this to fail, to prove that no matter how talented, you couldn't just walk back into greatness after losing everything. But another part of him, the chef, the artist, rooted for the man at the stove. Because when David stirred that risotto, he wasn't just cooking. He was remembering, rebuilding, redeeming. Stopwatch tick, tick, stir. Minutes passed like hours. Diners peeked into the kitchen window. A few even stood, quietly approaching the glass wall to watch. The tension was no longer about judgment. It was about possibility. What if he really could do it? David tasted the rice, shook his head, added a touch more broth, a whisper of lemon zest. Then, finally, he plated a simple, elegant white dish, a bed of golden risotto, perfectly seared scallops on top, a drizzle of saffron cream, microgreen for balance. He placed it gently on the counter and turned to Marcus. "Here," he said, "taste it." Fork and knife with plate, judgment time. Marcus stepped forward. He picked up a fork, still expressionless, and scooped a bite. The risotto was creamy, not mushy. The scallop, seared to perfection, buttery on the tongue. The saffron not overpowering, but fragrant and emotional. Bright, layered, soulful. He didn't say a word. He took another bite, then another, and then he put the fork down slowly. Behind him, the staff waited. The entire restaurant waited. Finally, Marcus looked up. "You still got it," he said, barely audible, but full of respect. More than applause. David didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply exhaled, the kind of breath a man holds for years without knowing. "Then give me a meal," he said. "No charity. Just what I earned." Marcus nodded. But instead of bringing out a single plate, he did something no one expected. He stepped back into the dining room and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the man who just cooked that saffron risotto used to have a Michelin star. Tonight, he earned something more. He earned back a piece of himself." There was silence, then a wave of applause, not the polite kind, but real from the gut clapping. A few diners stood. One woman wiped a tear. David, standing behind the kitchen line, looked out and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Belief. Clapperboard end of Act 2. That night, David didn't just cook. He proved that even when the world takes everything, it can't take your gift. Not if you hold on to it with everything you've got. But this was just the beginning. What came next would be even more extraordinary. The applause had quieted. The saffron risotto had been devoured, and David Langston, once a culinary legend turned invisible soul of the streets, sat at the edge of the kitchen, his back straight, eyes low, hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of it all. Chef Marcus Renner stood nearby, arms folded, his gaze unreadable. The taste of that risotto still lingered on his tongue, not just because it was masterfully made, but because it stirred something he didn't expect. Memory. I've tasted this before. Marcus paced back into the kitchen, muttering to himself. He knew saffron. He knew risotto. Hell, he'd trained under some of the best in Italy. But there was something hauntingly familiar about the way David layered flavors, like notes in a song that stirred a melody long forgotten. He spun around, looking at David. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" Marcus asked. David raised an eyebrow. "You already know. You recognized at the moment you tasted the first bite." Marcus blinked, taken aback. David continued, his voice steady now. "You studied in Nice, right? Under Lucien Bartle?" Marcus's heart skipped. "How would you know that?" he asked, almost accusingly. David gave a faint smile. "Because I was there, 2 years before you. I helped write his saffron-based recipe. Lemon memories in butter and smoke." Marcus stepped back. That couldn't be. Or maybe it could. The technique. The way the cream folded into the stock. How the acid hit just enough to brighten the seafood. It was signature Lucien. But even Lucien hadn't cooked it like this. David had taken it further. More emotion. More weight. It wasn't just food. It was memory. It was confession. "I didn't just disappear," David finally said, breaking the silence. "I lost my restaurant after a fire. Insurance refused the payout. Investors pulled. But the fire wasn't what destroyed me. It was what came after." Marcus didn't speak. He knew now this wasn't just a homeless man. It wasn't even just a fallen chef. This was someone who carried grief so deep it could only be expressed through flavor. Spoon one bite for the past. Back in the dining room, a woman named Julia sat alone at a table near the window. She had barely touched her dinner, but when she overheard whispers about a former chef cooking in the back, something told her to try it. She requested the special. Moments later, a plate of David's risotto was placed in front of her. One bite, that's all it took. Her fork paused midair. Her eyes widened. She stared down at the plate like it had just whispered her name. "No way," she whispered. She stood abruptly, walked straight toward the kitchen, and caught a glimpse of David through the glass. She gasped. "David Langston?" she said, barely audible. David looked up and froze. "Julia," he murmured. Broken heart, a ghost from the fire. Julia had been his sous chef back in Brooklyn, the heart and soul of his original bistro, Langston's Table. She was there the night of the fire. She had been the one to pull him out when the flames got too high. "I thought you left town," he said. "I thought you died," she replied. They stood in stunned silence, their eyes carrying years of words they never got to say. Marcus stepped back, watching this reunion unfold. It was like watching two chapters of a forgotten book collide into one sentence. "We're still here." Wine glass the truth spills out. David sat down with Marcus and Julia in the back corner of the kitchen, the risotto plate now cold between them. His voice was soft, but honest. "After the fire, I tried to rebuild, but I owed too much. I was sued for negligence. One mistake, one old wire, and it was all gone. Friends turned their backs. I drank, lost my apartment. I spent nights under bridges, trying to forget how saffron used to smell." Julia blinked away tears. Marcus stayed quiet. But David continued, "Every time I pass a restaurant, even dumpsters behind them, I'd stop just to smell the garlic, just to feel like I still existed." Marcus looked down, jaw tight. Then he said, "That bite you gave me? It tasted like grief, but also love, like something that had to be cooked, or it would break you." David gave a short laugh. "It almost did." Light bulb the idea is plated. Marcus stood, walked over to the pass. "Make another plate," he said. David blinked. "For who?" "For tomorrow," Marcus replied. "And the next day, and the one after." "What are you saying?" Marcus smiled. "I'm saying come back. Every night. Cook one dish. No promises. No contracts. Just you, your pan, and your truth. Let the city taste it." Julia smiled wide. "You're giving him a shot?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm giving him a station." Night with Stars midnight at Maison d'Or. That night, after the last table had cleared and the lights dimmed, David stood alone in the kitchen again. He looked at the burners, at the utensils, at the cutting board, then at the apron, now clean, folded neatly for tomorrow. He touched it like it was an old friend, a battle-worn soldier returning to familiar ground. Outside, the streets were still cold, the wind still sharp. But inside, for the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. Candle the taste of truth. Sometimes the deepest truths aren't spoken. They're stirred, seared, and served. And in a single bite, the world remembers who you are. The second night David Langston walked into Maison d'Or, he wasn't a stranger anymore. No longer that man the server side-eyed with suspicion. No longer the vagabond the dishwashers whispered about in the back. He wasn't even just a guest chef. He was a man on a mission, and his battlefield was the kitchen, gloves back in uniform, the crisp white apron, the gleaming knives laid out like soldiers ready for war, the clatter of prep stations, the scent of garlic sizzling in oil, the symphony of orders shouted across the kitchen. It all came flooding back. David stood in the corner at Station 5, the smallest but most visible line. Chef Marcus Renner had assigned it to him deliberately. It was the open view station where guests could watch every flick of the wrist, every toss of a pan. Marcus didn't say it, but David understood. If you want redemption, do it in the spotlight. And he was ready. Fried shrimp, the signature plate. Tonight's dish was his own creation. Fire-grilled shrimp with lemon garlic aioli and sweet corn puree. Simple ingredients, bold flavors, nostalgic aroma. David wanted to prove something, not just to Marcus or the guests, but to himself. As he seared the shrimp, the sizzle echoed like applause. The aroma turned heads. Even the waitstaff, usually immune to kitchen magic, paused to breathe it in. First plate out, then another, then 5 more. By 8 p.m., they had a problem. They were running out of shrimp. Clapping hands to come back, whispers begin. Julia, now the new floor manager at Maison d'Or, peeked in with a smirk. You've got people asking if the mystery chef is the same guy from last night. What do you want me to tell them? David wiped his brow, grinning. Tell them he's just getting started. Word began to spread. Customers returning for that flavor. Regulars whispering rumors about a hidden master. Food bloggers tagging the dish Taste of the Streets. Heart of gold. Marcus stood by the pass, arms folded, hiding a smile. He didn't say it, but David could see it in his eyes. You're earning your station. Speech balloon behind the scenes. Old wounds, new lessons. During the brief lull before dessert, David sat by the back alley door, catching his breath. Marcus joined him, holding 2 small espresso cups. "You still drink this stuff?" Marcus asked. David chuckled. "Only when I need to remind myself I'm alive." They sat in silence for a moment, before Marcus finally said what had been on his mind. "Why didn't you try to come back sooner?" David looked at the rising steam. "Shame," he said. "When I lost the restaurant, when I lost control, I didn't just lose my job. I lost my name. I didn't think I deserved a second shot." Marcus nodded slowly. "Well, now that you're here, what do you plan to do with it?" David looked up, eyes steady. "Make it count. Every plate. Every night. Wine glass, one dish, one story." Over the next few weeks, David was given more freedom. Not a promotion. Not a title. Just trust. And that meant everything. He introduced new dishes, each one with a piece of his past. A soup inspired by his mother's Sunday meals. A pasta sauce he perfected while sleeping behind an old Italian deli. Even a salad. Yes, a salad that told the story of the park bench where he used to sit for hours watching families eat across the street. Each dish was his journal. And the guests? They didn't just eat it. They felt it. Fork and knife with plate. "Who's cooking tonight?" By now, regulars were requesting David by name. A local food critic, anonymous, yet notorious, left a handwritten note on the receipt. "Whoever David is, keep him. He's cooking more than food. He's cooking heart." Instagram blew up. Hashtag Langston Legacy started trending. Marcus received 3 offers from investors who wanted to revive the brand. One even offered to fund a documentary, From Sidewalk to Stove, the David Langston Comeback. David laughed when he heard that. "Let me actually stay on my feet before they make a movie about it." Candle quiet nights, loud thoughts. But success didn't erase the weight. Some nights, David still walked the streets after his shift. Not because he had nowhere to go, but because the silence helped him remember why he came back. He passed the same shelters, nodded at the same faces. People he used to sleep beside, who still hadn't gotten their shot. And that haunted him. So he made a promise. "If I ever get a restaurant again, I'm hiring from the street up." Not charity, opportunity. Because he knew firsthand, redemption tastes better when it's shared. Fire the spark returns. One Friday evening, Marcus pulled David aside. "You ready for your own menu?" he asked. David blinked. "You're serious?" "We're calling it Langston's Corner. Every Friday. 5 dishes. All yours." David took a breath, looked around the kitchen, at the young line cooks watching him, at Julia, who never stopped believing, at the flame that once nearly destroyed him, now lighting his way. And he nodded. "Let's fire it up." Direct hit redemption in the kitchen. They say everyone deserves a second chance. But in David Langston's case, he didn't wait for permission. He took the heat and made something beautiful out of it. The grand opening was scheduled for a rainy Thursday. David Langston stood beneath the black awning of a small building on 9th and Rosemont, staring up at the golden sign that bore his name again, Langston's Table. Not David Langston, not Chef D, not the homeless gourmet, just Langston. It had been over a year since he first walked into Maison d'Or, soaked and starving, clutching the last shred of his dignity like a threadbare coat. But now, he wasn't begging for leftovers. He was serving purpose on a plate. Fork and knife with plate, a restaurant with mission. Langston's Table wasn't designed to be fancy. No marble counters, no moody lighting, no overpriced microgreens. It was warm. Wooden chairs, chalkboard menus, jazz softly humming in the background. But what made it different, what made it his, was the heart behind it. Half the staff had no prior restaurant experience. Some had just come off the streets. Others were from halfway houses, community shelters, or rehab programs. David had personally interviewed every one of them. "Skills I can teach," he told them. "But resilience? You've already earned that." He wasn't just building a restaurant. He was building a second-chance kitchen. Man cooked the first night. The line stretched down the block before the doors even opened. Food critics, Former colleagues, bloggers, and curious neighbors came not just for the food, but for the story, for the comeback, for the man they'd read about, rooted for, and maybe once written off. Inside, the kitchen was alive with a different kind of energy, not the usual clatter and chaos of pressure, but a nervous excitement. The cooks double-checked every plate. The servers rehearsed every step, and David, he moved like conductor, calm, intentional, passionate. At 6:05 p.m., the first dish hit the table. Braised short ribs over grit cake with collard green chimichurri. His late mother's Sunday special reimagined. Silence fell as forks hit mouths. Then came the smiles. Then the applause. Memo the review that changed everything. The next morning, David's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. New York Tribune had published a headline. From the sidewalk to the stove, Langston cooks up more than a meal. The review wasn't just glowing, it was reverent. It described his food as a symphony of soul, and more importantly, praised a mission. Langston's table isn't just serving plates, it's serving purpose. It reminds us all that greatness doesn't vanish. It waits, it weathers, and sometimes it walks in soaked, starving, and still burning inside. The article went viral. News crews showed up. Local talk shows called. Even Netflix left a voicemail. David didn't answer them all. He couldn't. He was too busy prepping for dinner service. Speech balloon moments that mattered more. But it wasn't the reviews or the cameras that stayed with David. It was the moment after closing one night when Jamal, his youngest line cook, once incarcerated at 17, looked at him and said, "Chef, no one's ever trusted me like this before. I don't even know why you did." David smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because someone once should have trusted me, too." Or when Marie, a former addict-turned-pastry chef, cried after serving her first creme brulee and hearing a guest say, "This is the best damn dessert I've ever had." Those were the real reviews. The kind that didn't fade with clicks or scrolls. Candle Redemption is a table with extra chairs. Langston's table grew into more than a restaurant. It became a community anchor. Each Thursday night, David hosted open-seat suppers, where patrons could pay for a meal for someone in need. Homeless guests dined next to business owners. Ex-cons discussed sauces with teachers. Strangers broke bread and barriers. He didn't just rebuild his reputation. He built a table big enough for everyone he once stood beside in the dark. Adult cooking full circle. 6 months in Maison d'Or called. Marcus wanted David to guest judge their annual culinary showcase. David paused, looked at the invite, and smiled. "I'll come," he replied, "but only if I can bring one of my sous chefs with me." That night, he walked into the same place he'd once begged for food, but this time in a tailored coat flanked by Jamal, who would go on to win the competition. As they walked out, a server whispered, "Chef Langston, it's good to have you back." David turned and replied, "I never left, just took the long way home." Trophy and name restored. By the end of the year, Langston's Table was named one of America's most inspiring restaurants by Time magazine. David was offered book deals, interviews, speaking gigs. He declined most, because for him, the goal was never fame. It was always legacy. And legacy isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the quiet, persistent moments of trust, of teaching, of believing. Sparkle's the final ingredient. David Langston once thought he'd lost everything, but what he found in return, purpose, community, healing, was more than any Michelin star could offer. Because redemption, in its purest form, isn't just about proving you still belong. It's about making space for others who never believed they could. And in that little restaurant on 9th and Rosemont, beneath the golden sign, bearing a name that nearly faded, Langston's legacy lives on.